words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
Sometimes hard work is not enough. Sometimes the best qualifications, the most experience, and decades of effort are not enough. In his new book, James Comey writes about his assumptions about the 2016 presidential election. He assumed, he writes, as nearly everyone did, that Hillary Clinton would be elected President of the United States. We all know the end of that story. Hillary Clinton received more votes than any candidate in the history of our elections except Barack Obama. Somehow, running against the most unpopular presidential candidate in recent history, she lost. Hillary Clinton did not lose the election because of qualifications or her experience or her effort. There was some other piece that was missing. We will leave this aside, but we can agree. People will be arguing for the next 100 years about exactly what was missing, but we can agree that she was not lacking for effort. A strong effort is not enough. Checking the boxes of processes and experience is not enough. We need to look for something that is missing. We need to be looking for the piece that is missing in our work. The missing piece does not require more effort from us. It requires different effort. The missing piece requires something inside us to change. The missing piece requires us to stop looking at the same things in the same way. The missing piece requires us to look for something we have not seen before. The missing piece requires us to hear a story we have never dared to hear before. This is true for us in the church. I have spent most of my life watching people work in churches. I have seen many very good people working in churches. And I will tell you that people in our churches do not lack for effort. They do not lack the hours, the desire to grow and flourish. The people in our churches do not lack skills or the experience. But there is a piece that is missing in many of our churches. There is something we have often not done. And if we do not find that missing piece, we will lose. What are we missing? We need to open our eyes. We need to open our hearts. We need to look for things we have never seen before. Let's begin by looking at our scripture readings. I think there is a piece we have been missing that is here in the story of Pentecost. So the first question is, what is Pentecost? Now, for followers of Jesus, we often think, first of all, that Pentecost is a Christian holiday. And that's only partly correct. Like almost everything in the Bible, Pentecost belongs first to our Jewish ancestors, to our great-great-great-grandmothers and grandfathers way back. Pentecost is a Jewish holiday. It was and is an important Jewish holiday called Shavuos. Looks like Shavuot when you see it written out in letters, or the Festival of Weeks. Pentecost is one of 3 pilgrimage holidays when Jesus and his parents made a pilgrimage to the temple for celebrations and worship services. Pentecost commemorates the day when God gave the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, to the people of Israel. So it's a big day. Jewish people from all around came to Jerusalem to celebrate the festival of Pentecost. By the time of Jesus, Jewish people lived all around the Mediterranean and beyond, all of those places mentioned in our reading in the book of Acts: Libya, Egypt, Arabia, Iran, Jordan, Syria, Turkey, Lebanon, Greece, Bulgaria, Italy, Macedonia, Crete, and the island of Cyprus. And this is the setting for our reading from the book of Acts. When the day of Pentecost had come, the 12 disciples were all together again in one place. And suddenly from heaven there came a sound like the rush of a violent wind, and it filled the entire house where the disciples were sitting. Divided tongues as a fire appeared among them, and a tongue rested on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages, as the Spirit gave them ability. Now the city was packed with people because of the festival. There were devout Jews from every nation under heaven visiting Jerusalem. And at this sound, the crowd of people gathered around the house. They were confused by the sounds they heard coming from the room where the 12 were gathered, because each one of them heard them speaking in the native language of each. Are we ready for something like this to happen in our world today? Are we ready for something like this to happen in our church today? Would we be glad to feel the inrush of the Holy Spirit into our lives? I think we're ready. We're not lacking for effort. How can we get something like this to happen in our world, in our church? What is the piece we have been missing? There are two answers to these questions. The first is that we do not know how the Spirit of God works and moves among us, so there is no recipe for getting something like Pentecost to happen again. The second answer is that there is a piece of the story from the book of Acts that we have been missing. It is the piece that is in our power to change, but it requires us to be changed. There's a piece of the story that we have been missing, and sometimes it has seemed like, at least back in our history, we have done everything in our power to make sure that the piece would never happen again. If you think back to the days when there was one Episcopal church for the white people and one Episcopal church for the black people, right? Or you think back to places where all of the black people were asked to sit in the balcony, right? We did everything in our power to make sure Pentecost would not happen again for hundreds and hundreds of years. The piece we often seem to be missing is about unity and diversity. Did you notice that the Holy Spirit came among the disciples when they were all together in one place? We have to get ourselves all together in one place. We don't know exactly what will happen when we are all together, but we can be pretty sure that if we just keep doing the same thing in our tight little groups that we love so much, there won't be much space at all for the Holy Spirit to work among us. Did you notice that the Holy Spirit came among the disciples on the day when it just so happened that they were surrounded by people from all over the world? Again, I don't know exactly how the Spirit of God works, but it does seem pretty clear that we're never experiencing anything like understanding people who are speaking in different languages if we are surrounded by people who speak and talk and act exactly the same way we do. For the past 2,000 years, many people who have read this passage from the Acts of the Apostles have done everything in their power to make sure they are surrounded by people who look and talk just like them. So this is something that is really important and good about St. Paul's. Most of the time, we are trying to be a place of prayer for people of all nations and in all backgrounds. Just a couple of examples. Our members are reaching out to welcome the residents of the YMCA apartments. Almost none of them would consider themselves to be Episcopalians. We say, that doesn't matter. Please join us. Our English-speaking members are working with our Sudanese members as we take the first steps in creating a Sudanese community center. We have a long ways to go, but many of our members are helping. Our church includes people who speak different languages, people who do not speak English at all, people who come from different countries around the world. For much of the past 2,000 years, this is the piece that the followers of Jesus were most often missing. We do not lack effort. We do not lack the sweat and the tears and the hours of work. We've been working at this for many years. Some of us are feeling a little tired. Don't give up. We are ready for the inrush of the Holy Spirit into our lives, but we will experience God's power in our lives only if we are willing to be changed. We may be empowered by the Spirit with gifts of speaking and gifts of listening, only if we are willing to get ourselves into a place where we are surrounded by people who are different from us. We will find the piece we are missing only when we get all of us together.